Let's review for trigonometry test 2B. That this test would be no calculator, so you have to do everything manually. And the test would be similar to the problem from page 110, number 13 through 42, and page 119, 34 through 42. So let's go over some examples. Okay, so let's go to page 110, and let's go and do 14. So all this problem, you need to draw a triangle, label all three sides, and from there you can figure out their ratio. Okay. So number 14, cosine of 0 degree. So 0 degrees is over here. So cosine is the horizontal. So horizontal is, if it helps you draw your coordinates, so 1, 0. And imagine that this is a circle, right? So radius is equal to 1, so that's your hypotenuse. So in this case, the cosine is the horizontal or the x over the hypotenuse, which is 1. So answer equal to 1. Okay. Let's go to 16. Cotangent of 0. Notice there's no circle, so it's 0 radian. And it happened that 0 radian is also 0 over here. Okay. So again, this would be 1, 0. Now the cotangent is cosine over sine, or the horizontal over the vertical. It would be 1 over 0, and so this is undefined. So when doing this kind of chart, write out a ratio, it helps you think through. Okay. Let's go to 18. Yeah, sine of 30 degrees. So you can draw your triangle, so 30 degrees. Again, each number on the clock is 30 degrees. So if you start at 3 o'clock, you got one number, that's 2 o'clock. Okay. And for sine, so this is the short side. So this is 1/2. Or you can do this. Some of you probably more used to 1, 2 squared root of 3. Okay. So sine would be 1 over 2. So this is equal to 1 over 2, and that's your answer. Let's go to number 20. You have tangent of 30 degrees. So again, each number on the clock is 30 degrees. So this would be at 2 o'clock position. Okay, so this would be 30 degrees. So again, just like before, we got 1, 2 squared root of 3. Now the tangent is the slope. The slope is y over x. So this is equal to 1 over squared root of 3. Okay. Since in the book it allows that, I'm going to allow you to have a square root on the bottom. But just for good habit, you might want to simplify, multiply by square root of 3 over square root of 3. But if you leave it like that on the test, I would accept that. But it's not the best. Okay, let's go to 22. Okay, you have cosecant over pi over 3. So pi over 3. Okay, so each number on the clock is pi over 6. Pi over 3 would be 2 numbers on the clock. Okay, so you're going to be at 1 o'clock position. So this is going to be a 1 o'clock position. So this will be 1, 2 squared root of 3. Okay. Now, cosecant is reciprocal of sine, right? So if you think about sine, it's easy if you do it this way first. So sine of pi over 3, sine is the vertical over hypotenuse. So this is equal to square root of 3 over 2. Okay. So from here, all you have to just flip it over. So again, when you have this kind of function, it's easier to do your primary. This is your secondary function. So easier to do your primary first. So you flip it over, you get 2 over square root of 3. Okay. Okay. Let's go to 24. Yeah, cosine of negative 3 pi over 2. Okay, so you start at 0. So here's your negative 1 pi over 2, negative 2 pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 2. So it's going to be right over here. Again, it helps you if you can write down your coordinates. So it would be 0, 1, right? That's your x and the y, right? So cosine is horizontal over hypotenuse. Right? Hypotenuse is always the radius of the 1. Okay, so it's going to be the horizontal, the x, over the radius or the hypotenuse. So you're going to 0 over 1. and so this will equal to 0. Okay. Let's go to number 26. You have tangent of pi over 2. So pi over 2 is right over here. Okay, again, write down your coordinates if it helps you to think. Okay, so tangent is the slope. So slope is going to be the y over the x. So equal to 1 over 0, right? Y over x. And so therefore, this is equal to undefined. Or another way to think about the slope. See, over here the slope is infinite, right? So it's undefined. Okay, let's go to 28. You have sine of negative pi over 3. So again, whenever you see the 3, that's two numbers on the clock. So negative pi over 3 is going to be 2 o'clock, two numbers this way. So if you start at 3 o'clock, you go 2, you're going to end up at 5 o'clock position. Okay, so that's your negative pi over 3. And so this is 1, 2, square root of 3. Right? Write your number first, then you have to keep track of the sign. This is a negative right over here. Okay. Okay, so sine of that is vertical over hypotenuse. So this will equal to negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay. Let's go to number 30. Cotangent of negative 30 degrees. So negative 30 degrees. 30 degrees is one number on the clock. So you start at 3 o'clock, you're going to end up at 4 o'clock. Okay, so that's your negative 30. So this is going to be 1, 2, square root of 3. That's your spatial 30, 60, 90 spatial triangle. So you can get your number first, then you worry about the sign. This is positive, this is negative, and positive, right? So cotangent, let's do the tangent first. So tangent of negative 30 degrees is sine over cosine, so it be equal to negative 1 over square root of 3, right? It's again, tangent is the slope, so it's the y over the x, right? The y over the x. So cotangent of negative 30 degrees would be reciprocal. Flip it over, you get negative square root of 3 over 1, right? And so that's it. Okay, let's go to number 32. Number 32, you have cosine of 7 pi over 4. So you can get your triangle, so here's your 0. Now, pi over 4 is halfway through, right? So this is 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. And it's going to be a 45 degree triangle, right? So, and again, after you do that, then it's going to be 1 square root of 2. This is a 45, 90 spatial triangle. So get the number first, then you get the sign correct. So now you can do the cosine. So cosine is horizontal over hypotenuse, would be 1 over square root of 2. Okay. So again, I'm going to allow you to have a square root on the denominator, but try not to do that if you can. If you remember, try to simplify. Okay. Let's go to 34. Cotangent of 11 pi over 6. Okay, so remember, each number on the clock is pi over 6, right? So 11, so you start over here. Okay, so if you start at 3 o'clock, and you go 11, so plus 11, you're going to end up at 14, okay, which is equal to 2 o'clock position. Okay, so 2 o'clock position should be right over here. And if not, let's go and try counting, right? So it's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, back up. Yeah, you have to go opposite direction. I'm going the wrong direction. So you actually have to, it's 2, so you have to go this way. Okay. So that if you count it 11, so it's going to be right over here. Okay. So it's one number off. So it'd be at, instead of 2 o'clock, it's 4 o'clock. It's one number off. Okay. Okay. So again, if you confuse, just don't worry, but just count them. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Right? 11. Okay. So what you up to that, right? This is going to be 1, 2, square root of 3. Okay, and you follow that, right, with a negative. Now again, if you're not familiar with the cotangent, just start with tangent. So tangent, so the tangent is going to be the tangent is going to be sine over cosine. So sine over cosine, so they equal to -1 over square root of 3, and so cotangent 11 pi over 6 is going to be equal to, you flip it over, so it'll be negative square root of 3. Okay. Now, one thing about the clock is that, remember, clock and the direction are opposite. So actually, positive, you have to minus. So if you start at 3 o'clock, you have to minus the 11 o'clock. Okay? And if you're not enough, you have to add 2. So make into, so 3 plus 12, right? You have to go 1. So you get 15 minus 11. That's how you get 4 o'clock position. Okay? So I was going the wrong direction. That's why it doesn't come out. Because the clock and the trigonometry, their direction are opposite. Okay? So what you do is you add 12 first, so you can minus 11, right? Because they're opposite. So that's how you end up with 4 o'clock. But again, it's best thing to just go and able to count the things around the clock. Okay? That way, you don't have to rely on all this gimmick. Okay? Just rely on your understanding, and it's better to do it that way. Okay, let's go to 36. You got cosecant of -2 pi. Okay, so here's your 0. Now, if you go this way, it's positive. Negative, you have to go this way. So when you -2 pi, it's got a complete circle, so it's right over here. And so you're going to get 1, 0. Okay, so cosecant came from sine, right? So sine of -2 pi is going to be, sine is the vertical over, the sine is the vertical over hypotenuse. So it's going to be equal to 0 over 1. Okay, so cosecant of -2 pi is going to be 1 over 0, and so it's undefined. Okay, let's go to number 38. Number 38, you have sine of -300 degrees. Now, if you don't like the negative numbers, you use a coterminal angle, so you add 360. Okay, so you end up with sine of 60 degrees. And so this is much easier to do. So 60 degrees is 2 numbers on the clock. So you start off here at 3 o'clock, so you go this way, you end up at 1 o'clock position. So get your numbers would be 1, 2, square root of 3, and all these are positive. So sine is vertical over hypotenuse. So this is going to be equal to square root of 3 over 2. Okay. Let's go to number 40. You have the tangent of 480 degrees. So you can, if the angle is too big, you use a coterminal. You can keep adding 360 or minus 360 to get into a better angle. So this will give you tangent of 120 degrees. So learn how to use coterminal angles. You can keep adding 360 or minus 360. Now, if it's radian, then you have to plus 2 pi or keep minus 2 pi, right? Depends on what direction. So if it's radian, you can keep adding 2 pi or keep minusing 2 pi to get to the nice angle, okay? And if it's degree, you keep adding 360 or minus 360 to get a nice angle, and that way you can easier to figure out. So 120 is going to be right over here. This is 90, so 120 will be right over here. And so this would be 1, 2, square root of 3, and this would be negative, right? Again, first get your number and then get your sign. So tangent is going to be the y over the x. So this will equal to square root of 3 over -1, right? So it's sine over cosine. So this is equal to negative square root of 3. Okay, let's go to number 42. You have secant of -510 degrees. So again, if you don't like the negative degree, just keep adding 360 or minus 360. So you get secant of, if you add 360, you get -150. So you can still negative, okay? But this one is not too bad. If you don't like it, you can add another 360, okay? But -150 is manageable. Starting from here, you go -90 and -60 would be right over here. Okay, so if you want to, you can add 360 more. So it becomes secant of 210. Okay, so you can learn how to use coterminal angles to get a nice angle that you're familiar with. Okay, so again, if it's degree, you add or minus, plus or minus 360. If it's radian, you plus or minus 2 pi to get to a nice angle. Okay, so over here, you can get your numbers would be 1, 2, square root of 3. Right, first get the number, then you get a sign. So this is negative and this is negative. Now secant, again, if you're not familiar with secant, secant came from cosine, right? So cosine of 210 equal to cosine is the horizontal over the hypotenuse, right? And therefore secant of 210 is equal to negative 2 over square root of 3. Okay, again, make sure you do it step by step. It helps you think through. Okay, now let's go to page 119. And let's do number 34. You have cosine of 5 pi over 6. Okay, so you need to know how to count this number. So again, so this 1. So from here, right, you go 0, 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6. It's going to be right over here. Okay. And so this is a 30-60 spatial triangle. So it would be 1, 2, square root of 3. Again, draw your triangle, locate your angle, draw your triangle, label all 3 sides, then get the signs correct. So this is positive, this is negative. So cosine is the horizontal over hypotenuse. So it would be negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay. Okay, let's go to number 36. You have sine of 3 pi over 2. So start from here. So this is 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. So 3 pi over 2 is going to be right over here. Okay, your coordinate would be, the x would be 0, the y would be negative 1. Okay, so sine and radius is hypotenuse. So radius is the hypotenuse is 1. Okay, because the length is 1, that's how I get a negative 1 from, because it's negative, right? So the radius is the length, so it's always positive. And the x and the y are coordinates, right? Okay, so sine is the y, or the vertical over the hypotenuse. So you're going to get negative 1 over 1, and so equal to negative 1. Okay, let's go to 38. Yeah, sine of negative 4 pi over 3. Again, if you don't like that, you can add 2 pi. Okay, so it becomes 2 pi over 3. Or you can just make sure you know how to count these, right? Okay, so start from 0, so you can get negative 1 pi over 3, negative 2 pi over 3, negative 3 pi over 3, negative 4 pi over 3. Okay, so it's going to be right over here. Or if you add 2 pi, which is the 6 pi over 3, right? That's 2 pi. If you add that, you get sine of 2 pi over 3. So if you start from here, you go 1 pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, right? Again, pi over 3 is 2 numbers on the clock. So from 3 o'clock, you go 2 numbers, so you get 1, and you go 2 numbers, you get 11 on the clock, right? So you can get the numbers, so it would be 1, 2, square root of 3, right? Then check the sign, so this is negative, positive, positive, right? Okay, so now you're ready to do this. So sine is vertical over hypotenuse, so it would be square root of 3 over 2. Okay, let's do number 40. You have cosine of 3 pi. Again, if the number is too big, you always can minus 2 pi, right? You keep going around the circle, so you're going to get cosine of pi. So from here, cosine of pi is going to be right over here. So the coordinate would be negative 1, comma 0, and the radius is 1, right? Again, radius is your length. Okay, you always use the 1 as your length for the circle. Okay, so now by looking at that, cosine is horizontal over hypotenuse. So it would be negative 1 by horizontal over hypotenuse, or the radius, which is 1. So negative 1 over 1, this will give you negative 1. Okay, let's go to number 42. You have sine of negative 11 pi over 6. So again, you can count the clock, or if you don't like that, you add 2 pi. Okay, 2 pi is equal to 12 pi over 6, right? 2 pi equal to 12 pi over 6, and so when you add, this becomes sine of pi over 6. So it's going to be right over here. So it's going to be at 2 o'clock position, right? This is one number on the clock. So this would be 1, 2, square root of 3. So get your numbers using your spatial triangle. Then check the sign, make sure all the signs are correct. So positive, all good. Now the sign is vertical over hypotenuse, so it would be 1 over 2, right? Vertical over hypotenuse. Okay, and that's it. So you can notice every problem you do exactly the same step. Okay? Every problem you locate the angle, draw your triangle, label all 3 sides, check for the sign, check for positive, negative, and you apply the function to get the correct ratio, and that's it. So that's kind of the technique for all the problems.